Story 1. The last few years I've had seasonal jobs that allow me to go to pretty interesting places and camp all summer. During the winters, I am provided with accommodation, and because of this I do not rent or have a house of my own. I simply move from my tent to free hosting. I'm a guy in my mid-20s. What did you expect? September and October are complicated times because I don't have accommodation and it starts to get cold. Let's go back to last October. I was a few weeks away from my work starting, so I was spending my time alternating between camping and staying at some friends' houses. After attending a friend's wedding, I got sick with some kind of incredibly bad cold or flu. I rarely get sick, but this was as bad as anything I've ever experienced. I decided to treat myself and spend on a motel room for a night or two. My voice was almost gone, with a terrible sore throat, cold sweats, aches all over my body, the whole package. I found a decently priced motel, not in bad shape, the kind where your bedroom door faces outside, not a hallway. I took a hot, long bath, snuggled up in bed, and was very pleased with my decision to get a room. And this is where it gets weird. I hear the door to the next room open and then a door slam. The man inside is on the phone and he's furious with someone. He's literally yelling into the phone, saying someone's truck is going to blow up. How could you do this to me? Etc., etc. Listening to him, you could tell that he had been fired from a job and was talking to his boss. All this time I hear things being smashed, walls being banged, more screaming. This is the time when most people would call the police, but I'm not like most. I had already smoked marijuana in the room. Come on, I'm sick as a dog. What did you expect? I didn't want to deal with the authorities. Suddenly, I heard a huge noise. Legit, I thought the guy must have tried to hang himself. At this point, it was already a little late. Perhaps 9 o'clock at night. I was sitting up in bed. I had just smoked some more to ease the pain that was running through my body, and I was thankful that the guy wasn't yelling into the phone or breaking things at the time. Just as I was starting to fall asleep, I heard a soft tap, tap, tap. I don't know, assuming that the guy next door is trying to repair something he broke in his rage. Tap, tap, tap. This time stronger. Tap, tap, tap. Now it's loud enough for my dog to bark. I get up, look through the peephole, and there's no one there. Return to bed. Tap, tap, tap. At this point, I have two emotions. The first, I am angry because someone is interrupting my sleep while I am sick. Second, I'm paranoid because I'm under the influence of something and my room probably smells like marijuana. Then I hear very softly, "Brother, let me smoke a little." I quickly realize that I can open the door and deal with this or risk this person getting angry and calling the police or something. Obviously, dealing with an unstable psychopath is better than the police, right? Just as I am about to open the door, it slams open in my face, and a man in his 30s pushes me aside and enters before I can react. I notice that he has an open knife in his hand. Oh, God. He immediately starts asking disturbing questions. Who else is in the room? I tell him that it is just my dog and me. He replies that this is a lie. Who else is in the room? It is very clear, just by looking at his eyes, that he is a very unstable person. I don't know if he's off his meds, on meth, or anything like that. He makes me show him the bathroom to show him that there is no one else here, while warning me of the consequences if I lie to him. All this time I'm debating my options. Keep in mind that I'm sick as a dog, high, and I've taken some NyQuil. Basically, I'm completely out of myself. Once he verifies that the place is empty, he changes the subject, all the while holding his beloved knife and threatening my dog. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any idea who I am? Keep asking. He says he's an undercover FBI agent. Clearly it is not. Then he tells me that I'm in trouble if I don't cooperate. All this had been going on for about 15 minutes. I began to see that this probably wouldn't end well if I didn't change my strategy of letting him talk. I say something like, "It's rare for an FBI agent to burst into a room wanting marijuana and holding a hunting knife." He responds by sticking the knife into the table and telling me that I don't know anything about federal investigations. It was becoming increasingly clear that this guy was a jerk. albeit a potentially violent one. As a last resort, I say something like, "I don't know why you're doing this. If you want to smoke some weed, that's fine, but I'm sick as hell and I want to go to bed." He then proceeds to make me carry the bowl and take the first puff to confirm that the marijuana was not poison. Then he took a puff. It was very evident that I had never smoked from a bowl before, because I had to show him the carb, where to light, etc. He takes his puff, coughs as if he were going to die, and smiles. He tries to give me a hug, closes his knife, and asks me if I want to go to the bar. I remind him that I'm sick, evident by the fact that I can only whisper, and he shakes his head almost embarrassed and leaves. His room was quiet the rest of the night, so it must have helped him calm down. The rest of the night, I lay in bed wondering if that had really happened or if I was hallucinating. In the morning, the mark that left the knife on the table verified that yes, I really smoked with a crazy person with a knife. I know many of you will say I'm an idiot for smoking in my room in the first place, to which I can only say it was a calculated risk. I knew the smell would go away by morning, so the housekeeping people wouldn't notice. And being in a state where medical marijuana is common, people are pretty friendly to the subject. I opted to smoke a little to ease my aches and pains, and it certainly worked, although I'm almost drawn to a knife in the face. Story 2. Ever since I was a teenager, I dreamed of visiting France. I imagined walking through the cobblestone streets of Paris, touring museums like the Louvre, and sitting in small cafes to enjoy a coffee with a fresh croissant. It was my escape fantasy, the place I wanted to go when routine and responsibilities were too heavy. Finally, in the summer of my 20s, I managed to fulfill that dream, but I could never have imagined how it would all end. My plan was simple: 2 weeks in France, starting in Paris, and then exploring a little more of the country. He was not looking for luxury. I preferred to stay in a small hotel, something authentic and cozy. I found one that seemed perfect, located in a quiet area, off the busiest areas, with quaint rooms and reasonable prices. When I arrived, I loved it. There was a homely atmosphere, the kind of place where you could relax after a long day of sightseeing. What I didn't know at the time was that this vacation, which I had planned so much, was going to become one of the scariest experiences of my life. The first night at the hotel was perfect. My room, located on the second floor, had a window that looked out onto a cobblestone alley. From there, he could hear the soft murmur of the city, distant conversations, the occasional noise of a motorbike passing by, and the bells of a nearby church. It was everything I had imagined. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, excited for what was to come. The first few days went on without problems. I visited the Eiffel Tower, walked along the Champs-Élysées, and enjoyed lunch overlooking the Seine River. It was a dream come true. But everything changed on the third day, when I returned to the hotel after an afternoon in Montmartre. As soon as I entered my room, something seemed strange to me. My suitcase, which I always close carefully before leaving, was open. Nothing seemed to be missing, but there was something disturbing about knowing that someone had been there. I convinced myself that perhaps I had forgotten to close it myself. After all, I was on vacation, and my mind was in 1,000 places at once. That night was the first time I felt inexplicable discomfort. As I tried to sleep, every little sound in the hotel seemed amplified. I felt a kind of tension in the air, as if someone was nearby, watching me. But once again, I told myself that I was just being paranoid. The next morning, I found something that made me feel even more uncomfortable. A small note, carefully folded, left on the pillow, said, "I saw you this morning. You are beautiful. I would like to know you more. Yours, A." My heart began to pound. Who was A? How had he entered my room? I tried to think of some logical explanation. Maybe a staff member had left a note by mistake, or even a confused guest. I went to the front desk to ask if anyone had been in my room, but the receptionist, a kind woman, categorically denied that anyone had access without my authorization. He offered me to change rooms, but I declined. I didn't want to exaggerate over something that might just be a misunderstanding. The next couple of days passed relatively normally, although I couldn't get the note out of my head. I tried to enjoy my vacation, but every time I returned to the hotel, a feeling of unease invaded me. And then one night, things escalated. I returned after a quiet dinner and found a package on my bed. It was wrapped in brown paper, and my first reaction was surprise. Maybe the hotel had left me a gift as a courtesy, I thought. But when I opened it, my surprise turned to horror. Inside the package were a pair of underpants. Used. Disgust and confusion hit me at the same time. Next to them was another note, written in the same calligraphy as the previous one. So you can think of me tonight. I felt my stomach churn. I immediately went down to the reception with the package in hand and demanded an explanation. This time, the hotel staff seemed as alarmed as I was. They promised to check the security cameras and change the lock on my door. But even with his guarantees, I felt more and more vulnerable. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in bed with all the lights on, looking at the door and window, listening for any little noise. Every shadow seemed like a threat, every creak, a sign that someone was trying to get in. The next day, I found something even more disturbing. Stains on the sheets of my bed. I don't want to go into details, but it was clear that someone had been there, doing something I can't even describe without feeling nauseous. I went back to the reception, more desperate this time. I demanded that they do something, anything, to prevent this from continuing to happen. I changed rooms, and they assured me that they would reinforce security. But somehow, they always found a way to keep harassing me. The penultimate day of my stay was when things came to a head. That night, I was sitting on my bed checking my phone when I heard a noise in the bathroom. At first I thought I had imagined it, but then I heard it again, a subtle movement, as if someone were inside. My body tensed. I got up slowly, trying not to make a sound. I walked to the bathroom and slammed the door open. There he was, a man in his 40s, bald and with a robust build. He was wearing a dirty t-shirt and holding a small knife in his hand. His smile was the most disturbing thing of all, a mixture of satisfaction and madness. I knew we would meet at last, he said in awkward French with a slight foreign accent. My instinct was to scream, but my voice didn't come out. Before I could react, he lunged at me, trying to catch me. I managed to dodge it and ran for the door. He grabbed my arm, but I managed to get out into the hallway, screaming for help. 2 hotel employees were nearby and ran towards me. When they saw the man with the knife, they pinned him down while I, trembling, explained what had happened. Police arrived quickly and took the man away in handcuffs. I later learned that he had a history of harassment and that other hotel guests had experienced similar situations. The most terrifying thing was that until that moment, no one had been able to identify him. He would always run away before they could catch him. That night, I didn't sleep, even with the man behind bars. The experience had left me completely upset. The following days, every little sound or shadow made me jump. I returned home with the certainty that I would never forget that vacation. I had dreamed of France all my life, but what I experienced was a nightmare that not even in my worst thoughts would I have imagined. Since then, I always make sure to research the places where I stay well and never ignore the signs that something is wrong again. Story 3. When I graduated from high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I lived in a small town, a place where everyone knows each other and opportunities are not abundant. To earn some money while deciding what to do, I took a job as a receptionist at a small family hotel that was close to the main road. It was not a luxurious place by any means, but it fulfilled its function. Most of our guests were truck drivers passing through the area or tourists making a stop before continuing their journey. It was a quiet job, perfect for someone like me, who preferred to avoid drama. But what happened one winter afternoon changed my perspective forever. Until that day, I believed that my town was safe, a place where nothing bad ever happened. How wrong I was. It was a Tuesday, about 5 in the afternoon. I remember it was cold and it had started to rain lightly. I was sitting behind the counter, checking some reservations on the computer when the front door burst open. I looked up and saw 2 men enter. Both were wearing ordinary clothes, jeans, somewhat worn leather jackets, and muddy boots. They didn't particularly attract attention, but something about their attitude made me feel uncomfortable from the first moment. I don't know if it was the way they looked around the lobby, as if they were evaluating something, or the fact that they seemed to be in a hurry. One of them, the tallest, approached the counter while the other stood by the door, as if he were watching. "We need a room," said the tall man, without saying hello or anything. His tone was dry, almost authoritative. I asked him for how many nights, and he replied that it was only for 1. As I filled out the form with her details, I noticed that she looked at the door frequently. His companion, the one by the entrance, looked restless, as if he were waiting for something. I handed him the keys and indicated the room number. It was 205 on the 2nd floor, just down the hall. The man nodded, took the keys, and walked back toward the door. I was surprised that they didn't immediately go up to the room. Instead, they left the hotel and headed toward an old pickup truck they had parked in front of the entrance. A few minutes later, I saw them return, but this time they were not coming alone. Among them, they were carrying a child. He would not have been more than 6 or 7 years old. He was wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. The strange thing was that the boy didn't say a single word. He also didn't try to let go or look scared, but there was something in his look that made me deeply uncomfortable. It was a blank stare, as if he was completely disconnected from what was happening around him. When they went upstairs with the child, I wanted to think that maybe they were his family and that everything was fine, but something inside me told me that I wasn't. At about 8 o'clock at night, I noticed that the men came down again. One of them came up to the counter and asked me for a couple of bottles of water, something we sold right there. As I searched for the bottles, I tried to strike up a conversation. "Is it your child?" I asked as naturally as possible. The man was silent for a moment, as if he was thinking about the answer. Finally, he said, "Yes, he is my nephew. He is spending a few days with us." He did not smile, nor did he show any gesture that corroborated what he was saying. He simply paid for the water and went back up the stairs with his partner. That answer did not convince me. Later, around 10 o'clock, both men came down again. This time, they were wearing jackets and seemed ready to go. The taller one came up to the counter and told me that they would go get some food and that they would be back soon. I told them there was no problem, and I saw them walk out the front door. I waited a few minutes, thinking that maybe they would come back quickly, but they didn't. At 11 o'clock at night, the boy was still alone in the room. He could see on the security cameras that he had not left at any time. I wondered if I should do something, but at the same time I didn't want to get in trouble. What if it really was her nephew and they had simply let him sleep while they went out to dinner? I kept repeating that to myself, trying to calm down. But at midnight, my uneasiness turned to worry. The men did not return, and the child was still alone in the room. Finally, I decided to go upstairs to make sure everything was okay. I knocked on the door of room 205. At first, I got no response, but after a few seconds, I heard footsteps and the door slowly opened. It was a child. He was standing in front of me, wearing the same gray sweatshirt, looking at me with those empty eyes that disturbed me so much. "Hello, are you okay?" I asked him in a low voice, trying not to scare him. The boy did not respond. He only looked at me for a few seconds and then lowered his gaze. I felt a knot in my stomach. I wanted to ask him more things, but something in his behavior stopped me. I didn't want to push him or make him feel uncomfortable. I told him that if he needed anything, he could go down to the lobby, and I left, although that decision would weigh on me later. Hours passed, and the men never returned. At 6 in the morning, when my shift was over, I decided to inform the manager. I told him everything, from the arrival of the men to the way they left the child alone. The manager, worried, went up to the room with me to talk to the boy. When we enter, we find him sitting on the bed, staring at the floor. Someone had left a backpack next to the bed, but there didn't seem to be any other belongings. We tried to talk to him, but he didn't say anything. The manager decided to call the police. When officers arrived, they checked the room and backpack. What they found inside confirmed our worst suspicions: forged documents, receipts, and some photographs. The IDs the men had used to register also turned out to be fake. The boy had apparently been kidnapped, and the men had rented the room to leave him there while they fled. They never returned to the hotel. Despite the investigation that followed, the men were never found. Police used the photos and fake IDs to try to track them down, but were unsuccessful. The only good thing that came out of all this was that the boy was reunited with his family, although I never found out all the details. To this day, I think about that child and what might have happened if men hadn't decided to abandon him. That experience taught me that evil can hide in plain sight, even in a small town where nothing is ever supposed to happen. If I learn anything from this story, it's that we should always rely on our gut feelings. I wish I had acted sooner. Story 4. This happened in the summer, and I think I was about 12 years old at the time. I was staying in a hotel in a fairly big city with my mom and younger brother. We were visiting our extended family, but decided not to stay at their house. My brother is several years younger than me, so I was usually asked to keep an eye on him. The day we arrived, my mom told me to do just that while she checked in and received our room card. So my brother and I sat on the sofa in the lobby and relaxed a bit. As we sat down, a man in his 40s walked into the hotel. The couch was in front of the hotel doors, so I saw it clearly. I remember that he was a very average person in terms of appearance. Describing their features and details could generate several different images. The man came in and sat on the couch in front of ours. I didn't think much of it until I realized he didn't go to the counter first. He just walked in and sat down. That made me feel a little uncomfortable. I thought he could have followed us. Luckily, my mom called us and told us that our room was ready. We left the lobby and went to our room. Shortly after, we left the hotel to go visit family. I forgot about the man for the rest of the day. We came back around 7, and my mom told us we could go swimming in the hotel pool. We all went to our rooms, changed, and went to the pool. A few minutes after we entered the water, the same man from before came in and sat down. I was wearing jeans and a sweater, so I definitely wasn't going to swim. Again, we didn't think much about it, until I saw that my mom was visibly worried. She pointed it out to me and said if she didn't leave in 5 minutes, we'd have to go back to our rooms. 5 minutes passed and he was still there, so we packed up our things and left. By then, it was already close to 8 o'clock. We had rented a movie to watch, so we planned to watch it and then go to bed. I noticed that my mom was a little nervous because the man had been watching us, and I started to worry a little more too. Halfway through the movie, my mom got up to take a shower. While I was in the bathroom, someone knocked on the door and said cleaning service in a high-pitched voice. I found it odd that the housekeeping staff came so late, but we needed another towel. So I opened the door. I wish I hadn't been so naive. He was the strange man. He gave me a smile and a little wave of his hand. I stood there as if paralyzed. My mind automatically thought of the worst possible situation: kidnapping, torture, etc. I heard the water in the shower turn off. He also stood there for a moment and then spoke. "How was your swim in the pool?" At that moment, my mom got out of the shower, saw the man at the door, pulled me back, and slammed the door shut. He then locked it and called the front desk from the hotel phone to report the man. I told him that he better call the police, but he didn't listen to me. Then he asked to change our room, and shortly after, we heard loud footsteps walking away down the corridor. Luckily, the man was gone. After that, we changed rooms and didn't see him again during our stay.